Mama? Mama? The word was barely more than a breath, soft and uncertain. Every eye turned. Julian Hargrove, the billionaire tech mogul known as much for his towering intellect as his unshakable coldness, looked up from the screen of his phone. He wasn't supposed to be looked at, let alone interrupted. And yet, his daughter Sophia Hargrove, barely 2 years old, had never spoken a word. At least, that was what everyone said. And now she was pointing straight at Ava. "Mama," the child whispered again. A ripple of unease spread across the room. Ava felt it before she understood it. Her chest tightened. Her breath caught. Before Ava could even react, Sophia's face crumpled. The child's eyes filled, her tiny mouth trembling as a scream tore out of her loud, raw, panicked. It wasn't a whimper. It was the kind of cry that came from terror, not discomfort. Ava dropped to her knees instinctively. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured, reaching out without thinking. Her hand hovered, then gently brushed the child's arm. "It's okay. I'm here. You're safe." The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Sophia screamed louder. Her body arched back violently in the high chair. Her hands flailed. Her cry pierced the room, sharp enough to make heads turn in alarm. Glassware rattled. A woman near the bar gasped. Ava recoiled, shocked. I didn't hurt her. I swear. What do you think you're doing?" a voice barked. Marco, the floor manager, rushed forward, his face red with panic. "Step away from the child. Right now." "I was just trying to calm her," Ava said, her voice already breaking. "She was crying. I didn't." "Don't touch her," Marco snapped, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Are you insane?" Sophia was sobbing uncontrollably now, gasping for breath, her small hands clenched into fists. Julian Hargrove stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "What happened?" Julian demanded. Marco didn't hesitate. "Sir, I'm so sorry. She," he pointed at Ava, "touched your daughter without permission. We train our staff better than this. Completely unacceptable." Ava's head snapped up. "That's not true. She called for me." She said Mama. "I just tried to," Marco laughed harshly. "You expect us to believe that? That you, a waitress, made a child speak for the first time in her life?" A few diners shifted uncomfortably. Others stared openly now. Julian's gaze cut to Ava, cold, assessing. "She said Mama?" he asked quietly. Before Ava could answer, Sophia screamed again, but this time, she leaned forward, reaching toward Ava with shaking hands, crying harder than before. "Mama! Mama!" The contradiction hung in the air, confusing and electric. Marco panicked. "Sir, I swear to you, we will not tolerate this kind of behavior," he said quickly, stepping between Ava and the table. "Some people will do anything for attention, or money." Ava stared at him, disbelief flooding her face. "That's not fair. I didn't do anything wrong." Marco turned on her fully now, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think crying wolf in front of a man like Mr. Hargrove is going to end well for you? Get away from the table." "I need this job," Ava said, tears spilling over. "Please. I didn't hurt her. I'd never." Julian hadn't spoken. His eyes were fixed on his daughter, who was now choking on her sobs, her gaze locked on Ava like she was the only solid thing in the room. Ava took a step forward. Marco shoved her. It wasn't hard, but Ava wasn't expecting it. Her heel slipped on the polished floor. She went down hard, palms scraping, knee striking marble. A sharp pain shot through her leg. "Get out," Marco hissed. "You're fired." The word hit harder than the fall. Ava looked up at Julian, desperation flooding her face. "Sir, please, I'm begging you. I need this job. My rent, my father's medical bills, I swear. I didn't mean any harm," Marco sneered. "Don't embarrass yourself further." Sophia let out a piercing cry when Ava fell, reaching toward her again, screaming through tears. "Mama! Mama, up!" The sound cut through Julian like a blade. "Enough," Julian said. The room froze. Marco turned, suddenly slick with nervousness. "Sir, again, my deepest apologies. We'll make sure she's escorted out immediately. 2-1. Julian didn't look at him. He walked to Ava instead. Slowly. Ava was still on the floor, tears streaking her face, her hands shaking as she tried to push herself up. Look at me, Julian said. She did. I want you to stand up, he said evenly. Ava struggled to her feet. Her apron was smeared. Her knee throbbed. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, humiliated. Sophia reached out again, sobbing uncontrollably. Julian's jaw tightened. Clear the restaurant, he said. Marco blinked. Sir? Now. But, now. The authority in his voice was absolute. Chairs scraped. Murmurs erupted. Guests were ushered out. Confusion and curiosity buzzing through the room. Within minutes, the orchid room was empty, except for Julian, Sophia, Ava, and security. Julian turned to Ava. What's your name? Ava, she whispered. Ava Lewis. And you've never met my daughter before tonight? Never. Sophia twisted in her chair, crying, reaching. Julian nodded once. Pick her up, Marco inhaled sharply. Sir, I really don't think. Julian looked at him. Marco, shut up. Ava hesitated, then stepped forward. Her arms wrapped around Sophia carefully, reverently. The moment the child touched her, the crying stopped. Sophia melted into her chest, her small fingers gripping Ava's blouse like it was oxygen. The silence was deafening. Julian stared. That, he said quietly, is not coincidence. He turned to Ava. You're coming with me. It's seating body. Ava's heart slammed against her ribs. I don't understand. You will, he said, but not here. As security escorted them out into the rain, Ava held the sleeping child close, her tears soaking into tiny curls. Her job was gone. Her dignity was in pieces. But deep in her chest, something else was breaking open, a truth she had buried 2 years ago, and it was calling her Mama. If this story moved you, hit that like button and drop a comment with where you're watching from. You might be closer to another listener than you think. Rain hammered the roof of the black SUV like 1,000 tiny fists. Ava sat stiffly in the back seat, her uniform still damp from the fall, her hands clutched around the small body of the child sleeping on her chest. Sophia's breath came slow and warm, her fingers tangled in Ava's blouse. As if letting go wasn't an option, Julian Hargrove sat opposite her in the rear-facing seat, one ankle crossed over the other, his elbows resting on the armrest like a king surveying a threat. His sharp eyes never left her face, but he said nothing. Ava tried to meet his gaze, then dropped her eyes to the floor. The car's interior smelled like expensive leather and subtle cologne, a clean, icy scent that didn't welcome emotion. I'm not a danger to your daughter, Ava said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Julian didn't flinch. Then how do you explain this? She called me Mama. I don't know why. You expect me to believe that? No, she admitted, her voice cracking. But it's the truth. He studied her in silence. For a moment, the only sound was the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers. Ava looked down at the child. She knew me, she murmured. Somehow. I don't understand it. But she wasn't afraid of me. Not really. She clung to me. She also screamed when you touched her. Then breathed, because she was overwhelmed. Ava said quickly, looking up. And scared. That scream wasn't pain, it was panic. You saw what happened afterward. The way she calmed down when I held her. Julian's jaw clenched. He tapped his fingers once against the leather armrest, then again. How old is she? Ava asked suddenly. 2 years and 1 month. Ava's breath hitched. The car hit a pothole. Sophia stirred slightly but didn't wake. Ava's voice shook. I had a baby. 2 years ago. I was told. I was told she didn't make it. Julian's expression didn't change, but his body went still. She was born premature, Ava continued, more to herself than to him. I was in Zurich. The doctor said there were complications. They never let me hold her. I only saw her for a second wrapped in a blanket. They said it was better that way. That I needed to let go. Julian's eyes narrowed. You gave birth in Zurich? Ava nodded slowly. He looked away for the first time, toward the darkened window. My daughter was born in Zurich, Same clinic, same doctor. Something shifted in his face. For a man known for logic and control, his stillness was suddenly louder than any outburst. "Who told you your baby died?" he asked, turning back to her. "Dr. Eris Thorne," Ava said. "He worked for a surrogacy agency. Gene Core Life." Julian exhaled, a long, careful breath. He looked at Sophia, then back at Ava. "Gene Core handled the pregnancy for my wife," he said. "Was it a surrogate arrangement?" He didn't answer. Ava's stomach flipped. "Mr. Hargrove, I need to know." "Julian." "What?" "You're holding my daughter." "You can call me Julian." Ava swallowed hard. "Julian, I was the surrogate." His entire body stiffened. "I signed a contract when I was 23. My father had just been diagnosed with heart failure. I needed the money for his surgery. The agency told me it was a closed contract. I'd never meet the parents. That didn't matter to me. I just wanted to help him." Julian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "What date did you give birth?" "October 8th, 2 years ago." Julian's lips parted, just slightly. "That's Sophia's birthday." The name hung in the air like a final piece sliding into a locked puzzle. Ava pressed a trembling hand to Sophia's back. "I always thought about her. Even though they told me she didn't survive. I used to wake up in the middle of the night, hearing a baby cry. I thought I was going mad." "Tonight as they presented, you weren't." They looked at each other, two people pulled into the same storm, unaware they'd been circling each other for years. Julian leaned back again, his voice quieter now. "When my wife died, they told me she gave birth naturally. She hadn't carried well. She had scarring from an old surgery, I was told. But I believed them. I was grieving. I didn't question anything." Ava blinked, trying to process what she was hearing. "You mean she wasn't pregnant?" "I don't know anymore," he said. "But if you're the surrogate, and Sophia has your DNA." "I didn't donate an egg," Ava interrupted. "It was supposed to be gestational surrogacy, not genetic." Julian raised an eyebrow. "Then why does my daughter call you Mama?" They sat in silence. The car pulled up to a wrought iron gate surrounded by tall hedges. A security guard in a rain poncho waved them through. The SUV rolled up a winding drive, revealing a sprawling estate perched above Lake Michigan. It was the kind of home that had its own name, its own history. Ava stared out the window in disbelief. The SUV stopped under a stone archway. Julian stepped out first and held the door. Ava didn't move. "You're not a prisoner," he said. "Not yet." Ava climbed out slowly, careful not to wake Sophia. Inside, the house was warm, silent. Old money, beautiful, oak paneling, Persian rugs, the smell of lemon polish and expensive stillness. A house that had witnessed power and silence more often than joy. Julian nodded to one of his staff. "Prepare the west guest room." Ava followed. Barefoot, still in her soaked uniform. Sophia was sleeping soundly now, wrapped in Ava's coat. They climbed a grand staircase. A maid opened a door to a guest suite the size of Ava's entire apartment. Julian gestured inside. "You'll stay here. I can't afford this." "Kundal." He tilted his head. "You're not paying." She hesitated. "And the girl?" He looked at the child in her arms. "She's safe, with you." Ava stepped into the room, her shoes dripping on the rug. She laid Sophia gently on the bed, covering her with a blanket. "She looks like me," she whispered. Julian stood in the doorway. "She has your eyes." Ava turned, her voice firmer now. "I want answers." "So do I," he said. "And I'll get them, starting tonight." 8. He closed the door behind him, leaving Ava in silence. Ava stared at the little girl sleeping peacefully in the bed that wasn't hers but felt like it should be. The warmth of the child still lingered on her skin. She hadn't imagined it. The child called her Mama. She didn't know what the truth was yet. But she was going to find it, no matter who tried to stop her. Ava didn't sleep. She sat in the guest room's high-backed armchair for hours, still wearing the wrinkled remains of her uniform. Legs curled beneath her as the rain tapped against the tall windows like a ticking clock. The room was far too elegant for her comfort: white linens, antique furniture, a fireplace with embers still glowing faintly. But the child sleeping in the middle of the bed made it feel less like a stranger's house and more like a secret waiting to be unlocked. Sophia hadn't stirred once since Ava had laid her down. Her breathing was soft and steady, the slight rise and fall of her chest calming in its innocence. Ava's eyes burned, but not from exhaustion. It was something deeper, rawer. She hadn't held a child since that day in Zurich. The clinic. The cold room. The doctor's voice. "I'm sorry. She didn't make it. It's better not to see her. We'll take care of the remains." Where? She had signed the final discharge papers with a shaking hand. Numb and sedated, and she'd buried the pain in the same place she'd buried the image of the baby she wasn't allowed to hold. Until now, until tonight. Ava stood and crossed to the bed quietly, kneeling beside Sophia. She brushed a soft curl off the child's forehead, her fingertips trembling. A birthmark peeked just beneath the collar of Sophia's pajama top, a tiny, strawberry-shaped smudge. Ava's breath hitched. She remembered that mark. Not from a dream. From a second, just one, when the nurse had hesitated before taking the baby away. Ava had seen it then. Barely. But she'd never forgotten it. "Oh my God," she whispered. She sat back down hard, one hand over her mouth, the other over her chest, as if holding her own heart in place. The door opened. Julian stepped inside, dressed now in a dark sweater and slacks, his phone in one hand and a tumbler of something amber-colored in the other. He stopped when he saw Ava on the floor by the bed. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked quietly. She stood slowly. "Not really the kind of night that ends in rest." Julian didn't smile, but his voice was less sharp now. "I called in a contact, a private genetics lab. They're sending someone first thing in the morning. We'll run a DNA test. You think I'd lie about this?" "I think I can't afford to believe you just yet," he replied. Ava crossed her arms. "And I can't afford to be dragged into your world without knowing what the hell happened 2 years ago." Julian took a sip from his glass. Agreed. There was a long pause. He looked at Sophia, then back at Ava. She was mute. He said finally, "Not a word." 2 years of silence. Therapists, speech specialists. Nothing. Then she sees you, and... He gestured to the bed. "She knew me," Ava said, voice soft. The way she clung to me, it wasn't confusion. Julian nodded, slowly. Ava stepped closer. "Julian, what happened the day your daughter was born?" He set his drink on the nightstand and sat in the chair opposite her. "My wife, Isabel, had insisted on delivering in Switzerland. She said she wanted privacy, to avoid paparazzi. I was in New York when I got the call. She'd gone into labor early. I flew out that night. But when I arrived, she was already gone." "Gone?" "They said she died during an embolism, massive, unexpected. The doctor Aris Thorne told me she hadn't made it. But the baby had." "Sophia." Ava's hands curled into fists. "Thorne. He told me the opposite. That my baby didn't survive." Julian looked up, eyes narrowing. "He was the attending doctor both times. And the agency Gene Corps, they disappeared after I got back. Emails bounced, office closed. I couldn't even get a medical record." Julian exhaled sharply through his nose. "Sounds like a setup, a switch, or a cover-up." 25. They sat in the quiet, the rain still whispering against the windows. Ava's voice was low. "Do you think she was even pregnant?" Julian stared at the fire, his jaw tight. "I don't know. She traveled a lot, spent long stretches in Europe. She sent ultrasound photos, but I never went with her to appointments. I was dealing with a hostile takeover at the time. I trusted her." Ava felt a flicker of something, sympathy, anger. It was hard to separate the emotions. "You think she faked the pregnancy?" Ava asked carefully. "I think she wanted a child more than anything," Julian said. "And I think she was willing to go to any length to get one." The child stirred slightly in her sleep, and they both turned instinctively. Ava moved to sit on the bed's edge, checking on Sophia. The girl sighed and rolled toward her. Still asleep. "You're good with her," Julian said, surprising her. Ava didn't look up. "I lost her once. I won't lose her again." Julian watched her carefully, measuring the steel beneath the heartbreak. If the DNA test confirms what we both suspect, then you'll have a claim. I don't want money, Ava snapped. I didn't say that. I want my daughter. Julian stood, adjusting the cuffs of his sweater. She's mine, too. There it was, the wall. The protective instinct of a father. Ava understood it, even as it stung. I'm not trying to take her away, Ava said, but I deserve to know her, as well. And she deserves the truth, Julian added. Another silence, this one less hostile. Julian turned to the door. You should rest. Ava looked around. There's no lock on the door. There are cameras in the hall, Julian replied. You're not a prisoner, Ava. But I don't fully trust anyone, yet not even you. She stood. I'm not the one who lied. No, he agreed. But you might be the one who was lied to. He hesitated in the doorway. If you need anything, press the call button on the wall. Someone will come. I just want her to be okay. So do I. He left without another word. Ava sat beside her daughter until dawn. She didn't need a DNA test. She already knew. Morning came quietly to the Hargrove estate, as if the house itself understood that noise would be inappropriate. Pale winter light slipped through the tall windows, settling gently over the guest room where Ava still sat on the edge of the bed, her back straight, her eyes heavy but alert. Sophia was awake. She lay on her back, curls spread across the pillow, brown eyes wide open and studying Ava with an intensity that made Ava's chest ache. There was no fear in that gaze, no confusion, just recognition. Hey, Ava whispered, afraid her voice might break the moment if she spoke louder. Good morning, sweetheart. Sophia didn't answer. Instead, she rolled onto her side, scooted closer, and pressed her small palm flat against Ava's stomach. It was a simple gesture, instinctive and unthinking. Ava inhaled sharply. That was how babies did it. That was how her baby had done it during those first flutters she'd felt at night, alone in her small apartment, one hand on her belly, promising a child she would never meet that she would be okay. You remember, Ava whispered. Don't you? Sophia's mouth opened. No sound came out at first. Then her brows drew together, and she tried again. Ma. Ava's throat tightened. She nodded encouragingly, tears pooling in her eyes. It's okay. Take your time. The door opened softly behind her. Julian stood there, freshly showered, his hair still damp, dressed in a crisp button-down and dark slacks. He stopped when he saw the scene. Ava sitting on the bed, the child leaning toward her, their heads close together like they belonged that way. Sophia turned her head and saw him. Her expression shifted. Not fear, never fear, but something more reserved. She didn't reach for him. She didn't cry either. She simply watched. Julian felt it like a punch to the ribs. She slept through the night, Ava said quietly, not looking at him. Julian nodded. She usually doesn't. There is one's eye. Sophia tugged gently at Ava's sleeve, impatient now. Mama, she said, clearer this time. The word landed hard in the room. Julian closed his eyes for half a second. Ava looked up, bracing herself. I'm not trying to replace you. I know, he said, his voice rougher than before. But you have to understand what this looks like. It looks like a child who found her mother, Ava replied, her tone calm but unyielding. And a father who was never given the whole truth. He didn't argue. He stepped farther into the room. Breakfast will be ready shortly, he said. You should eat. Ava almost laughed. I just got fired, shoved onto a marble floor, and dragged into a billionaire's house in the middle of the night. Forgive me if my appetite is selective. Julian's jaw tightened. Marco is no longer employed here. That surprised her. Here? I own the orchid room, he said flatly. Or rather, I did. I sold my stake an hour ago. Ava stared at him. You did that because of me? I did it because he crossed a line, Julian replied, and because he humiliated someone in front of my daughter. Sophia reached for Ava again, wrapping her arms clumsily around her waist. Ava instinctively supported her, helping her sit up. Julian watched the movement carefully. You handle her like you've done it 1,000 times. I carried her for 9 months, Ava said softly. Even if I never got to hold her after. Silence stretched between them again, heavier now with daylight. A knock sounded at the door. A woman in her late 50s stepped in, her posture formal but her eyes warm. "Mr. Hargrove, I'm Eleanor. I manage the household." Julian nodded. "Eleanor, this is Ava Lewis." Eleanor's eyes flicked briefly to Sophia, who was now clinging to Ava's side. Something like understanding passed over her face. "Breakfast is ready," Eleanor said kindly, "and the nurse will arrive at 10. "Aight." "Nurse?" Ava asked. "Routine," Julian said. "Given everything, I want her examined. No distress, no pressure." Ava hesitated, then nodded. "That's fair." They moved to the dining room together. The table was long enough to seat 12, but only 3 places were set. Sophia sat in a booster seat between them. She poked suspiciously at her scrambled eggs, then looked at Ava as if asking permission. Ava smiled faintly. "Go ahead. They won't bite." Sophia mimicked the smile and picked up a piece with her fingers. Julian watched this exchange, something shifting behind his eyes. "I called my lawyer," he said after a moment, "and my private investigator." Ava stiffened. "To investigate me? To investigate Gene Core Life?" Julian replied. "And Dr. Eris Thorne. Whatever happened 2 years ago, it wasn't an accident." Ava set her fork down. "I want everything. Medical records, contracts, names. I don't care how buried it is, $1. You'll have it," Julian said. "But understand this, once we open that door, we don't control what comes out." Ava met his gaze. "I've already lost too much to be afraid of the truth." Sophia dropped her fork and looked between them, confused by the tension. She reached for Ava's hand again, squeezing. Julian noticed. After breakfast, the nurse arrived, a calm, professional woman who spoke gently and kept her distance. Sophia stayed glued to Ava's side the entire time, her small hand never letting go of Ava's shirt. "She's healthy," the nurse concluded. "Physically, emotionally, she's been under stress, but she responds very strongly to this caregiver." "Caregiver." Ava swallowed the word. Julian nodded. "Thank you." Once the nurse left, Julian turned to Ava. "Until we have answers, I want you to stay." "In this house?" "Yes. And if I say no?" Julian didn't answer immediately. He looked at Sophia, who was now half asleep against Ava's shoulder. "Then I say this," he replied quietly. "If you walk out that door, people who don't want the past uncovered may notice, and they won't shove you onto marble floors." Ava felt a chill crawl up her spine. "You think someone planned this?" "I know they did," Julian said. "And if you're the missing piece, that makes you a target. With no tension." Ava looked down at the child in her arms, at the life she had been denied and given back all at once. "Then I'm not going anywhere," she said. "Not without her." Julian nodded once. "Good." From the doorway, Eleanor watched them with quiet eyes. She had seen many things in this house. Power, grief, secrets, but never this. Never a child who had found her voice. Never a mother who had found her way back. The past was awake now, and it wasn't done asking for answers. The storm had passed by the time the investigator arrived. Crisp morning sunlight filtered through the stained glass transoms of the east hallway, bathing the old oak floors in muted color. Ava stood in front of the full-length mirror in the guest suite, dressed now in clean, borrowed clothes, simple jeans, and a soft gray sweater that Julian's housekeeper had laid out for her. She looked almost like herself, but not quite. Downstairs, voices echoed low and steady. Julian had summoned her 15 minutes ago. Sophia, freshly bathed and changed, clung to Ava's side as they descended the wide staircase together. The child refused to be carried this time, walking unsteadily on her own feet, one tiny hand gripping Ava's finger like a lifeline. At the bottom of the stairs, Julian was waiting in the foyer with a tall, severe-looking woman in her early 60s, short silver hair, a no-nonsense dark blazer. She looked like someone who'd seen things that couldn't be unseen and wasn't impressed by any of them. "Ava," Julian said, "this is Margaret Doyle. She's handled my corporate investigations for over 20 years. Discreet, relentless, and expensive," Margaret added dryly, extending a hand. Ava shook it. "I'll take relentless over polite right now." "Good answer," Margaret replied. Let's get started. Enguo. They moved into Julian's library, a cavernous room filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, dim sconces, and the faint scent of worn leather and aged paper. Ava sat on the small couch with Sophia in her lap, while Julian and Margaret took armchairs opposite her. Margaret pulled out a tablet and began swiping through files. I started digging the moment Julian called. GeneCore Life filed for bankruptcy 15 months ago. Their offices in Zurich, Chicago, and Madrid were all shuttered within weeks. Employees vanished off the map. No lawsuits. No records beyond the basics. No one just disappears like that, Ava said. They do when they were never real in the first place, Margaret replied. GeneCore was a shell, a front for something else. And the more I dig, the more one name keeps coming up. She tapped the screen and turned it toward Ava. Dr. Eris Thorne. Ava's blood turned cold. That's him, she said. He was there the day I gave birth. He told me the baby died. He even gave me a grief counselor's card, as if it were all standard protocol. Margaret nodded. According to medical records Julian provided, Thorne was also listed as the attending physician for Isabel Hargrove's delivery. Same date. Same clinic. Julian's voice was quiet. We both had him. On the same day. Margaret continued, her fingers flying across the tablet. I also found an offshore payment to Thorne's private account the day after the birth, €500,000. The transfer came from a holding company linked to Isabel's trust. Ava stared at her. Are you saying Isabel paid him? I'm saying she made sure this man had reason to lie, Margaret said. Julian leaned forward, steepling his fingers. She wasn't supposed to get pregnant. There were complications from a car accident when she was a teenager, but a year into our marriage, she told me we were expecting. I believed her. Ava looked down at Sophia. So you think she hired GeneCore to find a surrogate? Me. And passed off the child as her own? It's worse than that, Margaret said. She orchestrated a swap. Told the world she carried the baby, used Thorne to stage the delivery, and had you convinced the child had died. She took Sophia. You were eliminated from the picture. Ava's arms tightened around the child. Why? Why not just have a normal surrogate agreement? Julian was the one who answered. Isabel came from a family obsessed with legacy, appearances, perfection. A surrogate would have made her look weak in her circles, like she was broken. She was broken, Ava said bitterly. Julian didn't argue. Sophia stirred in her lap, glancing between the adults, her tiny brow furrowed as if sensing the tension. Margaret stood. I'll keep digging. There's more. There always is. But we're going to need a statement from you, Ava. Everything you remember about that clinic. That day. Every name. Every conversation. Ava nodded. I'll write it out. And be careful, Margaret added, her tone clipped. If Thorne is still out there, he won't want this uncovered. People who get paid to hide babies don't enjoy the spotlight. After she left, the room fell into a deep, unsettling quiet. Julian rose and paced toward the fireplace, his back to Ava. Do you want to pursue custody? Ava blinked. What? He turned to face her. If the DNA test proves you're her biological mother, which I believe it will, you'll have legal grounds. I have no intention of fighting you, but I need to know where you stand. I don't want to fight either, Ava said. But she's mine, and she's yours. This isn't about a courtroom. It's about what's right for her. Julian gave a faint, weary nod. That's what I want too. Ava stood slowly. Then let's stop pretending we're enemies. He met her eyes. Are we? Not if we're fighting the same people. Julian didn't answer, but the tight line of his jaw eased slightly. Sophia reached up toward Ava's face. Mama? Ava leaned down, pressing her forehead gently against her daughter's. I'm here, baby. I'm not going anywhere. From the hallway, Eleanor's voice called gently. There's a delivery for Miss Lewis. Ava frowned. For me? Eleanor stepped in holding a small box. White. No return address. Ava took it slowly, her hands suddenly cold. She opened the lid. Inside was a single photograph, a grainy black and white image. Ava holding a newborn. and behind her, just barely in frame, stood Dr. Eris Thorne. On the back of the photo were the words, "Some truths were never meant to be found." Julian stepped closer, reading over her shoulder. His eyes narrowed. "It begins." Julian Hargrove stared at the photograph like it was a time bomb, silent, but ticking. Ava sat on the edge of the nearest armchair, her hand still gripping the edge of the box, knuckles white. Sophia played quietly on the rug beside them, oblivious to the tension in the room. Ava turned the photo over again, staring at the scrawled message. "Some truths were never meant to be found." Her voice was barely a whisper. How did this even get here? Julian picked up the box, inspecting it. No postage, hand-delivered. No fingerprints. No note. Really signs and Hada was. Eleanor hovered in the doorway, anxious. It was left at the gate this morning. The security guard assumed it was one of Mr. Hargrove's deliveries and let it through. "I can review the camera footage." "Do that," Julian said, "and call in Hank. Tell him to sweep the property." Eleanor nodded and vanished. Ava stared at the image again. This photo was taken at the clinic, the day Sophia was born. Look at the tile. Look at the bed frame. I remember that wallpaper. I remember the cold in the room. Julian leaned closer. "That's you holding her. Just seconds after delivery. And that's Thorne," Ava added, pointing to the background. Julian exhaled, then sat on the coffee table directly across from her. So someone was documenting it. Secretly. Someone inside. And now they're warning me to stop. Julian's voice dropped low. "Not just warning. That's a threat." "Oh." Sophia crawled toward them, her arms raised toward Ava. Ava gently pulled her into her lap, holding her close, her eyes still on the photograph. "I thought losing her was the worst thing that could happen," Ava murmured. "But learning she was taken, stolen, and that I was meant to lose her? That's worse." Julian said nothing. He didn't have to. 2 hours later, the Hargrove estate was under lockdown. Private security prowled the perimeter. Every camera on the property was reviewed frame by frame, but whoever had delivered the package had done so like a ghost, no face, no plates, no trail. Margaret Doyle returned with news. "I found a connection between Thorne and the holding company that paid him," she said, spreading documents across Julian's office desk. "It's owned by a man named Richard Mullaney, retired diplomat. Now, a private contractor for high-level international discretion services." Julian frowned. "You mean a fixer?" "Exactly," Margaret said. "He specializes in sanitizing high-profile family messes, illegitimate children, infidelity, inheritance disputes. He's worked with royalty, politicians, and Isabel Hargrove." Ava stepped closer. "So she hired him? Looks like she used his company as a middleman to arrange the birth, the deception, and your separation." Julian's hands curled into fists. "Is he still active?" "Unfortunately, yes," Margaret replied. "And if he's behind this warning, you can expect more to come." Ava paced the room. "He thinks we'll back down." Julian met her gaze. "We won't," Margaret nodded. "Then we go on the offensive. I've already reached out to a contact in Zurich. Someone who used to work at the clinic." "Used to?" Ava asked. "The clinic was shut down 6 months ago after a quiet settlement with the Swiss government. No press, no details released." Julian's jaw clenched. "Cover up." "Likely," Margaret said, "but I think I can get this contact to talk." Ava folded her arms tightly. What if the photo was from them? What if it's a breadcrumb, not a threat? Margaret gave her a look. That's not how men like Mullaney operate. If he wanted to confess, he'd send lawyers, not photographs with threats on the back. Julian looked down at the image again. But someone did take this. And someone kept it. Which means someone has the full truth. Ava's mind raced. What if it's a nurse, or an orderly? Someone who saw what happened and couldn't speak then but wants us to find them now. Margaret tilted her head. Then they're risking everything to make contact. Julian stood suddenly. Then we need to find them. Before someone silences them first. Later that night, after Sophia had gone to bed, Ava stood alone on the stone terrace overlooking the lake. The water reflected the moonlight in broken shards. The cold November air wrapped around her like a second skin. but she didn't go inside. Julian stepped out behind her, a glass of bourbon in hand. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. Ava didn't turn. You ever wonder how many people knew? Knew what? That this wasn't an accident, she said. That a woman like Isabel Hargrove could steal a child from someone like me and never face a consequence. That people stood by and let it happen. Julian took a slow sip. I wonder that every day. With her world, Ava finally turned to face him. What kind of mother does that? He didn't answer right away. My wife. She was complicated. Julian said quietly. Brilliant. Beautiful. But deeply afraid of being seen as weak. She was raised to believe image was everything, that scars weren't to be shown, and she thought motherhood was a costume she could put on, Ava said. Yes. And what about you? She asked. What were you? A prop in the photos? Julian didn't flinch. At the time, I didn't ask enough questions. Ava shook her head. You trusted her. I did, he said. And now I trust you. That made her pause. Don't, she said. Not yet. I'm still trying to trust myself. Julian looked out over the lake. When that photo arrived today, my first thought was, what if Ava did this? Her breath caught. But then I saw your face. Holding her. That wasn't posed. That was real. Ava's voice was low. She's mine, Julian. I feel it in my bones. Want a depths? He nodded. I believe you. They stood in silence for a long moment. Inside the house, the baby monitor crackled softly. Sophia stirred in her sleep, murmuring. Ava turned toward the sound instinctively. She knows me, she said. Julian's voice was calm, certain now. And I think she always did. Far down the driveway, headlights flickered once, then disappeared. A car watching. Or waiting. The war for the truth had begun. And someone out there didn't plan to lose. The next morning, Ava awoke to the sharp sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. The screen glowed with an unfamiliar international number. She sat up slowly, careful not to disturb Sophia, who had crept into her bed sometime during the night and now slept peacefully, curled against her side. The call ended before she could answer. She reached for it, heart quickening, and saw a single new text message. Meet me at 11 a.m. Old clinic lot. Zurichstrasse 9. Come alone. Tell no one. It's CZN. Below the message was a photo, blurry, hastily taken of a nurse's ID badge. The name, Clara Voss. Ava didn't recognize the face, but something about the eyes felt familiar. She saved the image, heart racing, then deleted the message. Downstairs, the estate bustled with quiet energy. Eleanor had already prepared breakfast. Sophia sat in the kitchen nook beside Julian, spooning oatmeal into her mouth with intense focus. Julian looked up as Ava entered, scanning her face like he always did now, as if searching for new cracks in her expression. Sleep? He asked. Some, Ava replied, kissing Sophia's head before sitting across from him. He slid a file toward her. Preliminary results came in. Not the DNA test yet, but background on Richard Mullany. He's connected to several other suspect surrogacy operations over the last decade. The patterns match. Young women, high-pressure contracts, closed adoption language. Ava flipped through the pages quickly, skimming. He preys on desperation. Julian's jaw tightened. And cloaks it with legality. I need to go out today, Ava said suddenly, her voice steady. Just for a couple of hours. Julian's brows lifted slightly. Anywhere in particular? Just need air. He studied her. You're not the type to run. I'm not running. Then take someone with you. We've increased security. She paused, forcing calm. I'll be careful. Is one. Brack. Julian looked toward Sophia, then back at her. You'd better be. Ava's Uber dropped her off at a quiet intersection in downtown Chicago. It was nearly noon by the time she walked the final block to the address from the message. Zurichstrasse 9 was a parking lot now empty except for cracked pavement, weeds, and a small, rusted gate. It had once been a private clinic before the ownership folded and transferred everything overseas. Now, it was a forgotten space in a city of noise. A woman waited by the edge of the lot, hood up, scarf hiding most of her face. She didn't look up until Ava was within a few feet. Then, slowly, she pulled down her scarf. It was her, Clara Voss. Older now, hair grayer than the ID photo, but unmistakably the same woman. Her eyes were sharp with nerves and something deeper regret. "You came," Clara said, in a thick Swiss accent. "You said to come alone," Ava replied. Clara looked around nervously. "I can't stay long. I'm being watched." "And? By who?" "Thorne and his people. They still check in on everyone who worked the Hargrove file." Ava swallowed hard. "So it was a file." Clara nodded. "Everything was documented. The pregnancy, the blood work, your labor, the child's removal. Even the sedative you were given." Ava blinked. "You were there?" "I was the one who cleaned your face," Clara said softly. "I was supposed to monitor your vitals during delivery, but when you passed out, Thorne made the switch. The baby was never recorded under your name. She was registered as Isabel Hargrove's child before she even left the room." Ava's throat tightened. "Why didn't you stop him?" "I tried," Clara said, voice cracking. "But there were threats, payments. And I had a child of my own, a daughter with leukemia. The hospital bills. I didn't have choices." Silence stretched between them. Ava nodded slowly, pain etched in her face. "I don't forgive you. But I believe you. I have this 40. Clara reached into her coat and pulled out a small flash drive. "Everything I could save before the system was wiped. Medical files, security footage, voice recordings." Ava took it carefully. "You've just put yourself in danger." "I already was. But someone has to make it right." Ava looked her in the eyes. "Why now?" Clara hesitated, then whispered, "Because I heard the child speak." Ava froze. "You what?" She called out. "In a video. Security footage from the clinic. It was never archived officially, but I kept a copy. She was just minutes old. They handed her to Thorne, and she cried once, then stopped, and whispered, 'Mama, I swear it.'" Ava covered her mouth, overcome. Clara stepped back, scanning the street again. "Use it. But be careful. They won't stop." "Neither will I," Ava said. Back at the estate, Ava locked herself in the library and plugged the flash drive into Julian's secure laptop. She scrolled through folders labeled with codes, dates, and anonymous patient names. One stood out, Patient Z19. She clicked. Inside were ultrasounds, delivery notes, video files. One showed her unconscious on the table. Another showed Thorne cradling the newborn and walking out of frame. Then finally a 6-second clip. The infant turns her head. Her eyes flutter open, and her mouth forms one word, "Mama." Julian entered the room quietly, watching her from the doorway. Ava didn't turn. "She said it then," Ava whispered. "Before she ever saw me again." Julian stepped closer, eyes on the screen. "Then she never forgot." Ava turned to him. "We have proof now. Of everything." Julian nodded, his expression hardening. "Then let's use it." But even as they stared at the evidence, a message pinged on Julian's phone. No sender, just one line. "Too late. She's already watching." And attached a live image. Sophia, playing alone in the garden. Ava dropped the flash drive. Julian sprinted for the door. Because whatever they'd just uncovered, they weren't the only ones watching. Julian burst through the terrace doors with a speed Ava didn't expect from a man in dress shoes. She was right behind him, heart pounding, lungs burning. The garden stretched wide under the pale autumn sun, its hedges trimmed into quiet elegance, its trees mostly bare now. And in the middle of it, Sophia stood alone, her arms outstretched, spinning slowly in the grass, chasing the light. "Don't run to her!" Ava shouted, grabbing Julian's arm just as he lunged forward. "Wait!" Julian froze, his chest heaving. "There could be a trap," she added, eyes sweeping the grounds. "A camera, a drone, or worse." Eleanor rushed onto the patio behind them, phone in hand. Security's sweeping the perimeter. No breach so far. But there was a blind spot north hedge. Someone could have been here minutes ago. Julian's jaw clenched. "Get a man on every corner of the property. I want the entire estate swept top to bottom." "Yes, sir." As Eleanor darted away, Ava slowly stepped into the yard, arms open. "Sophia, Baby girl, come here. Sophia turned, eyes lighting up when she saw Ava. She ran, barefoot, giggling with a joy that stabbed Ava right in the heart. Ava knelt, catching her mid-sprint and holding her close, breathing her in like oxygen. I've got you, she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. Mama's here. Julian moved in, crouching beside them, placing a gentle hand on Sophia's back. Did anyone talk to you out here? Sweetheart, did you see anyone? Sophia tilted her head. Lady, Ava's eyes sharpened. What lady? Sophia looked toward the hedge. With the shiny shoes, Julian stood, scanning the north perimeter. His voice darkened. She was here. I'm back inside. The security team found the small surveillance drone buried under a bush near the garden's edge. It had been professionally disarmed and left behind deliberate. A message. A flex. In Julian's private office, Ava paced while Margaret Doyle reviewed the flash drive. Sophia sat on the rug beside her, coloring in quiet concentration. But even in her calm, she seemed more alert than usual, as if she too could sense the shift in the house. Margaret removed her glasses. The footage is legitimate. If it gets out, it would spark a scandal no PR firm could bury. Julian leaned against his desk. Then we leak it, anonymously. Let the world pull on the thread. Too risky. Margaret replied. You've got more to lose than your reputation, Julian. That child in the garden? She's the thread, the key, the target. Ava sat beside Sophia and took her small hand. I need to take her somewhere safe. You mean hide? Julian asked, not unkindly. I mean protect, Ava said. We can't be on defense anymore. We need to make a move. Margaret nodded. Then we flipped the game. Mulaney's not just hiding in the shadows. He's using your fear against you. We make him believe he's lost control. Ava raised an eyebrow. And how do we do that? Margaret smiled thinly. By making you visible. Very visible. 2 days later, Ava and Sophia walked hand in hand into a child advocacy center on Chicago's north side. A swarm of press stood waiting. The release had gone out early that morning. Surrogate mother files lawsuit against International Clinic for Stolen Child. Julian's legal team had drafted it overnight. Ava's face, once invisible to the world, now appeared across every morning show, every news ticker, every trending feed. This is insane, Ava muttered as the cameras flashed. Insane is what they did to you. Margaret replied beside her, keeping her voice low. Now you turn it around. Ava stepped to the podium, microphones tilted toward her like hungry mouths. I'm not here today because I want revenge, she began, her voice shaking but strong. I'm here because a lie was written into my child's birth certificate. A lie that stripped me of my daughter and gave her to a woman who didn't carry her, didn't deliver her, and didn't deserve her. Gasps, murmurs. Ava pressed forward. For 2 years, I grieved a child I was told had died. I buried a name, not a body. And now, I know that she was alive all along, growing up in a mansion. In silence. Waiting for a voice she recognized. A pause. Then she said, softly, she found me. And now I'm going to fight to keep her. The crowd erupted in questions. Ava turned and walked away. Behind her, Julian emerged from the side hallway, offering no comment, just presence. Back at the estate, security tripled. Reporters camped outside the gate, but no one was allowed near the house. Sophia stayed inside, surrounded by books, toys, and familiar faces. Ava never left her side, until the call came. Julian handed Ava his phone. It's Clara, he said. She's in trouble. Ava answered quickly. Clara? What happened? Clara's voice was panicked, barely a whisper. They know. Someone broke into my flat. Took my files. I ran. I'm hiding in the old sanatorium near Seelwald. I think I'm being followed. I'll come to you, Ava said. No, Clara hissed. Don't. If you come, you'll lead them right to me. Then what can I do? A beat of silence. Then Clara said, there's something I didn't put on the flash drive. A ledger. Names. Mulaney's other clients. I've hidden it. But if I disappear, Go to the back wall of room 32. Remove the second panel from the floor. It's there. The line went dead. Ava looked at Julian. She's running out of time. Julian nodded. Then we don't wait. By nightfall, a plan was in motion. Julian arranged for a private jet to Zurich. Ava insisted on going alone, but Margaret overruled her. You go in alone. You don't come back, she said. We go together. Quiet. Fast. Julian stepped into the nursery where Sophia was sleeping. He knelt beside the crib, brushing a hand over her cheek. She's the best thing Isabel ever gave me, he whispered to Ava, who stood in the doorway. She's the only thing Isabel didn't deserve, Ava said. Julian rose and looked her in the eyes. Come back to her. Ava nodded. I will. Outside, the night stretched long and cold. The game had changed. Now they were the ones hunting. The sanatorium stood like a ghost against the mountainside, abandoned long before the term privacy concerns became a euphemism for buried crimes. Cloaked in the gray mist of the Swiss Alps, its cracked facade and broken windows looked like the set of a war film, not a maternity clinic turned cover-up factory. Ava stepped out of the black SUV, boots crunching the gravel path. Margaret followed closely behind, her coat buttoned high against the wind, a steel briefcase in one hand and a stun gun in the other. Behind them, 2 local security men, both ex-military and fluent in 5 languages, scanned the perimeter with silent precision. Why here? Ava asked as she stared up at the crooked signage above the entrance. Seelwald Clinic, Est. 1921. Margaret checked her tablet. Before they had their modern offices, Gene Corps ran early experiments here. Less oversight, more discretion. Clara worked here as a trainee nurse before being transferred to Zurich. And room 32? West Wing. Staff quarters likely sealed off. Let's move. The air inside was colder than outside, the kind of cold that crawled into your bones and nested there. They moved slowly down long, dusty corridors lit only by their flashlights. Walls cracked from years of decay. Torn paper records scattered like dead leaves. The faint smell of mildew and old medicine lingered in the air. Margaret led the way to the West Wing, scanning faded room numbers. 30, she whispered. 31. She stopped at the next door. It had no number, just a black mark, where the paint had peeled. This is it. The door creaked as it opened, revealing a small room, 1 rusted cot, a crumbling dresser, and a broken window patched with plastic. Ava moved to the corner where the floorboards looked newer, replaced, perhaps, after something had been hidden. Second panel, she murmured, crouching. With Margaret's help, she pried the board loose. Dust and time gave way to something small. Wrapped in waxed cloth and bound with surgical tape, she unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, old but preserved. On the front, etched faintly in fading ink, Ledger #3, Mulaney Clients, Zurich, Private. Margaret flipped it open. Each page was filled with handwritten notes. Initials, dates, payment amounts. Some pages had photographs clipped in women, babies, even contracts with forged consent signatures. Ava flipped faster, her hands shaking. Then she stopped. Her own name. Louis, Ava. Z, 19. $200,000. Unregistered donor. Status. Separated. Next to it, a black and white photo of her face, paperclipped to a DNA report. God, Ava whispered. Gotcha, Margaret muttered under her breath. Suddenly, a noise echoed down the hallway. A faint scuff of boots on stone. Not their guards. Too slow. Too deliberate. Margaret motioned toward the door, silent and sharp. Ava pocketed the ledger. Let's go. They exited into the corridor, flashlights off. Margaret held her stun gun at the ready. One of their guards peeked around the far corner and gave a small, urgent gesture. Go now. They ran. Gunfire cracked behind them, splintering the plaster. Ava ducked, shielding her head. Their guards returned fire from cover. The hallway erupted into chaos shouts. Echoing steps. Muzzle flashes slicing through dust. Margaret pulled Ava through a side stairwell, the ledger pressed to her chest. They emerged into the forest behind the building, where a second SUV was waiting. Within minutes, the engine roared to life, and they were speeding down the winding mountain road toward safety. Back at the hotel, Ava sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling as she opened the ledger again. Julian's voice came through the satellite call. "You got it?" "Yes," Ava said, swallowing hard. "Everything. Names, payments, even fake death certificates. This is more than just our case, Julian. This could take down half the elite in Europe. And what about Sophia's entry? She's listed under Isabel's name, but Clara's handwriting next to it says, Surrogate, Ava Lewis. Confirmed biological match." Julian's silence on the line was heavy. "Then we have the proof." Ava's voice was steel. "No, Julian, now we have leverage." At midnight, back in Chicago, Margaret uploaded encrypted copies of the ledger to 4 different secure servers. The original was placed in a bank vault under Ava's name. At 12:30 a.m., a courier delivered a copy to Richard Mullaney's office. No message, just the ledger. At 2:17 a.m., Julian received an email with no subject line. Attached, a short video. Isabel Hargrove, sitting in a dark room, speaking to someone off camera. "Do you have it?" the voice asked. She nodded. "The girl's already delivered. No one will know. I've paid Thorne. And the surrogate? Gone. She'll wake up in a recovery suite and think it was a stillbirth." "Excellent. We'll draw up the certificate." The video ended. Ava's fingers curled into fists. The final thread had snapped. They had the voice, the ledger, the video, and still, something in the air felt unfinished. As she lay beside Sophia that night, listening to the child breathe, Ava whispered into the dark, "They'll come harder now." Sophia turned in her sleep and whispered, "Mama, stay?" Ava kissed her forehead. "Always." The courtroom was colder than Ava expected, not in temperature, but in mood. It wasn't packed. Not yet. Just the pre-hearing crowd. Attorneys on laptops. A few curious clerks. One journalist in the back row pretending to check his phone. But the energy was there. Crackling. Anticipating. Julian sat beside her at the petitioner's table, wearing a dark navy suit and a face like granite. Calm, focused, unreadable. Ava had learned to recognize this version of him. It was the CEO, not the father. Not the man who rocked Sophia to sleep when the nightmares came. Not the man who had stayed up late coaching Ava through depositions. No. This Julian was a weapon. And today, he was pointed directly at the truth. Margaret Doyle stood near the back with a legal assistant and a box of evidence. Ava smoothed her dress and looked around the room. On the other side of the courtroom, the respondent's table remained empty, except for the attorney. No Isabel, no appearance, no statement. Just a name printed on a placard. Isabel Hargrove, in absentia. "She's not coming?" Ava asked quietly. Julian's jaw ticked. "She hasn't been seen in weeks, but the court ordered her to appear. She has her people. She knows how to delay." Ava clenched her fists. She knows how to hide. The judge, a composed woman in her 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for cutting through theatrics, entered the room and called the hearing to order. Everyone rose, then sat. "Petitioners Julian Hargrove and Ava Lewis," the clerk announced, "filing for postnatal correction of birth record, seeking shared custody, with amendment to parentage status and fraud claim." The judge glanced over the file. "This is highly unusual." "Yes, Your Honor," Julian's lead attorney replied, "but necessary." The child in question, Sophia Hargrove, was removed from her biological mother at birth, under fraudulent circumstances. We have proof that the birth certificate was forged and that the biological mother, Miss Lewis, was led to believe her child had died. The judge raised an eyebrow. "And the child's legal mother?" "Mrs. Isabel Hargrove, Your Honor," the lawyer said. "She is currently unreachable, though we have reason to believe she orchestrated the deception." The judge turned her attention to Ava. "Miss Lewis, do you understand the implications of what you're claiming here? You're asking this court to declare your maternal rights retroactive to the day of birth?" "I am," Ava said, her voice clear. Because they were never legally surrendered. They were stolen. The judge sat back. Let's proceed. Hours passed. Witnesses were called. Depositions played. Clara Voss's recorded testimony was admitted into the record. Julian submitted the DNA results, the ledger, the flash drive, and the video of Isabel's confession. Ava listened, every muscle tense, as her story was retold by others piece by piece. The pain, the deception, the theft. It sounded colder in legal terms, but no less devastating. At one point, Sophia's pediatrician testified, the child displayed developmental speech delay that, in my opinion, stemmed from prolonged emotional distress and isolation. It yesed, and then, quietly, she only began speaking after reconnecting with Miss Lewis. When it was time for Ava to testify, she rose, took the oath, and sat in the witness chair. Miss Lewis, the lawyer asked, do you remember the moment you realized the child was yours? Yes, Ava said. She looked at me and said one word. Mama. I didn't need a test. I felt it in my blood. And why are you fighting for this legal correction? Ava turned toward the judge. Because the truth matters. Because there are other women like me discarded, manipulated, silenced. And because my daughter deserves to know she was wanted. Every second, every breath, she was wanted. A hush fell across the room. Julian never took his eyes off her. After recess, the opposing counsel made one last effort. There is no living party here disputing the current birth record, he said. Therefore, no basis for an emergency change exists. But Margaret stood, interrupting. That's where you're wrong, counselor. The living party is sitting right there, she pointed at Ava. And she was erased illegally. That makes her claim not just valid, but urgent. The judge didn't even ask for further argument. She simply folded her hands. I will render my decision in 72 hours. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel fell. Outside the courthouse, cameras exploded with light. Journalists screamed questions. Ava and Julian moved quickly, surrounded by private security. No comments, no eye contact. But once they were inside the car, safe, Ava let out a breath that shook her shoulders. She's going to rule in our favor, she whispered. Julian glanced at her. You think so? I know so. 3 days later, the ruling came in a sealed envelope delivered to Julian's attorney. Petitioner Ava Lewis is hereby recognized as the biological and legal mother of Sophia Grace Hargrove. Petitioner Julian Hargrove is recognized as the biological father. Custody shall be shared equally. The forged birth record is vacated. The court finds clear and convincing evidence of fraud. An investigation into criminal misconduct is ordered. Ava stood in the library, reading the words again and again. She hadn't cried when Sophia first said Mama, but now she did. That evening, as the sky turned indigo over Lake Michigan, Julian found her on the balcony. Sophia was asleep upstairs. The estate was finally quiet. You did it, he said gently. We did, she corrected. But this is just chapter 1. Julian nodded. I know. He reached into his pocket and handed her a folded document. From Clara. Came this morning. Ava opened it. It was a list. Names, dates, more surrogates, more stolen children. At the bottom, a single note in Clara's handwriting. They weren't just taking babies. They were building families custom-made for the powerful. Ava stared at the page. This isn't over, she whispered. Julian's voice was grave. No, it's only just begun. Ava hadn't seen upstate New York since she was 21. She remembered it only vaguely from a road trip taken with a friend before everything in her life fell apart, long before Sophia, long before betrayal wore the face of motherhood. But this time was different. The trees along Tannersville Road were bare, their crooked limbs reaching like arms desperate to warn. The black SUV rolled slowly past the old iron gates and up a narrow gravel path toward the house that Margaret's sources had traced to one of the names in Clara's list. Barbara C. Whitmore. Retired philanthropist. Widow. Former board member of Gene Corps International. Quiet. Wealthy. And almost completely erased from the public eye for over a decade. But not from the ledger. She financed 3 cases, Ava whispered, staring at the printout in her lap as the vehicle slowed. One of them labeled Z-Class Transfer Unregistered. No names, no location, That's the one Clara flagged as most suspicious, Margaret said from the front seat, meaning it's the one no one wanted found. Julian, sitting beside Ava, glanced at her. You sure you want to walk in there? I have to, Ava said, her voice calm but charged with steel. She's the next link. They stepped out onto the gravel. The house loomed before them, an aging colonial mansion with ivy growing across its stone facade and shutters that hadn't been painted in years. But the grounds were pristine, guarded. Someone still lived here and wanted it hidden. They were met at the door by a housekeeper in a navy sweater and sharp eyes. May I help you? Margaret spoke first. We're here to speak with Mrs. Whitmore. She doesn't receive guests. Julian handed over a card. She'll want to speak with us. And the housekeeper eyed the card, no name. Just a number, and something in her face shifted. Wait here. She returned 5 minutes later with a nod. She'll see the woman. Only her. Ava stepped forward before Julian could protest. That's fine. Barbara Whitmore sat in a high-backed chair in a sunroom filled with plants and antiques. Her hair was snowy white and perfectly pinned, and she wore a cardigan like armor, with pearls resting gently against her throat. She looked like someone's grandmother. She also looked like she could gut a senator with her words and walk out without a wrinkle. You're Ava Lewis, she said, her voice smooth. I recognize your face. It's been quite the story. Ava sat across from her. I'm not here for attention. Of course you are, Barbara said coolly. You're disrupting very old arrangements. Ava pulled the ledger copy from her bag and laid it on the table. Then maybe you can explain this entry. Z-class transfer. 3 infants, 1 confirmed surrogate deceased, 2 labeled undisclosed, and all connected to your funding accounts. Barbara didn't flinch. Do you have any idea what you're tampering with? I know women were drugged, contracts were forged, lives were stolen. Barbara raised a brow. Some lives were saved. Children placed in homes of power and opportunity. Don't you dare, Ava hissed. These weren't rescues. They were abductions. Barbara sighed, lifting a crystal glass of water. And yet here you are, reunited with your child. Not everyone gets that ending. Ava leaned forward, fury simmering beneath her calm. Then give me the names. The others. The ones who didn't get their children back. Let me find them. Let me help them. Barbara looked at her for a long moment. Then she set the glass down with a soft clink. I don't keep those names. I funded the operations. The records went directly to Mulaney's group. Ava studied her. But you saw them. You approved them. Terry Dal. I signed checks. No, Ava said. You bought children. Silence stretched between them. Then Barbara asked, do you know how old I was when I realized I couldn't have children? 22. My fiancé left. My family called me broken. I spent 40 years building an empire of good works, and none of it erased the ache of not being a mother. And so you funded a black market? I funded control, Barbara said, finally showing emotion. Over nature. Over loss. What was taken from me, I took back from the world. And if that offends your sense of justice, then so be it. Ava stood, shaking. I'll see you in court. Barbara smiled faintly. You won't, because I'll be dead before that ever happens. Outside, Ava got into the SUV, her hands still trembling. Julian looked at her. Well, she admitted to funding the operation, Ava said, voice cold. But she says the records were with Mulaney. Margaret frowned. We need those documents. Is to her godding. Ava nodded. And I think I know where to look next. Later that evening, back in Chicago, Julian received a call from his personal banker. We had an unusual request today, sir. Someone tried to access the vault where Miss Lewis's original ledger is being stored. Julian stiffened. Who? We're not sure. The badge was cloned. Security intercepted the attempt, but the intruder escaped. Ava, who had been listening nearby, stepped forward. He knows. Julian met her eyes. They're hunting the original. Ava exhaled. Then we beat them to it. Margaret pulled up her laptop. I can have 2 of our men fly out tonight to retrieve it. No, Ava said. I'll go. Julian blinked. What? I need to see it again. All of it. I need to be the one to protect it. Julian searched her face for hesitation. He found none. Then I'm going with you. They arrived in New York by dawn, just as the city's skyline emerged from the morning fog. At the bank, they were escorted to the underground vault, where the original ledger sat sealed in a climate-controlled case. Ava opened it, slowly. Inside, on the back of one final page, was something she hadn't noticed before: a name hastily scribbled in faded ink. E. Whitmore. Control folder, Sierra Vault. Status, dormant. Expunge after activation. Ava looked at Julian. There's a second archive. Julian's brow furrowed. Where? She turned the page over. Tucked into the margin was a business card for a storage unit company with an address in Nevada. Desert, Julian muttered. Perfect place to hide a graveyard, Ava whispered. No, it's where we find the rest of them. The Nevada sun was brutal. A kind of heat that made everything feel dry and suspicious. Like the desert itself was holding a secret. Ava squinted through the dust blowing across the stretch of cracked highway as they neared the address scrawled on the back of the ledger page: Sierra Vault. Unit 47E. The facility was isolated, no nearby town, no signage, no welcome desk. Just rows of reinforced metal storage units and a single surveillance tower. A place where people came to store things they didn't want found. Julian drove the rented SUV slowly through the lot. Margaret followed behind in a second vehicle, with 2 private agents armed and on alert. This place reeks of cover-up, she muttered through the comm. Julian pulled up in front of Unit 47E. The keypad on the door was rusted but functional. Ava stepped out and input the code etched in the corner of the card they'd found: 72390. The lock clicked open. Inside was dark. Cooler than outside. Boxes stacked against the walls. Steel cabinets. A dusty desk. Ava moved slowly. Flashlight beam gliding across labels. Gene Core Archives. Mulaney Class Z. Surrogacy Trials. 2006. 2014. She stopped at a black cabinet sealed with an old medical-grade security tag. Julian stepped up, used a small bolt cutter, and broke it open. Inside, rows of folders, each marked with a year and a number. Look for anything marked with Z class or E. Whitmore, Ava said. They moved quickly. Then Ava froze. She held a folder stamped Z class transfer, ZR019. Opening it, she found ultrasounds, lab results, sedative prescriptions, all under the fake name she'd been registered with during her pregnancy. Eva Lonsdale. Julian looked over her shoulder. That's you. Yes, she whispered. And this? She turned the page. There was a second name, listed under intended parent: Isabel Whitmore Hargrove, daughter of Barbara Whitmore. Julian exhaled. Isabel was her proxy, not just a buyer, her daughter. The implications were chilling. She gave her daughter my baby, Ava said, her voice tight, and raised her as the rightful heir to the Whitmore legacy. A silence filled the room. Then Margaret's voice crackled through the radio. We've got movement. North entrance. Black SUV. No plates. Julian snapped into action. Let's go. But Ava held up a hand. Wait. We need all of this. If they came for it, we can't leave it. Julian scanned the room. We can't carry everything. Ava spotted a fireproof case in the corner. She and Julian grabbed as many critical folders as they could, 5 total, each one labeled with Z-Class. Margaret's agents moved to cover them from the outside, weapons drawn but hidden behind dark jackets. As they exited, the black SUV pulled in fast, cutting across the lot. Drive! Julian barked. They jumped into their cars and sped off, kicking up desert sand as they veered back onto the highway. The SUV gave chase. Who are they? Ava asked, clutching the case to her chest. No idea, Julian said, eyes fixed on the mirror. But they want this bad. They didn't lose the tail until they reached a gas station 30 miles out. Margaret's driver cut through a back road, ditched the vehicle in an alley behind a diner, and switched to another rented car waiting there under an alias. Julian had arranged the fallback plan in case of a breach. Smart man. Back at a secure safe house outside Reno, Ava and Julian laid the folders out across a wide table. Each one detailed a different woman, all marked surrogate, with matching DNA records that proved they were biological mothers, none of whom had been listed on official birth certificates. Worse, several files included logs of behavioral manipulation, sedative protocols, postpartum isolation treatments, false grief therapy. They gaslighted these women into believing their children were dead, Ava whispered, or never theirs to begin with. Julian pointed at one name, Angela Ruiz, listed as deceased, but no death certificate filed. Ava leaned in. She might still be out there. And this one, Julian picked up another folder, was a woman named Marcy Lane. Her baby was placed in the home of a sitting U.S. senator's sister. Ava stared at him. They weren't just stealing children, they were planting them into families of influence. Julian nodded grimly. And building loyalty from the ground up. Later that night, Ava stood by the window, looking out over the moonlit desert. The wind howled against the glass. Julian stepped beside her. You okay? No, she said honestly. But I'm focused. He offered her a glass of water. This is bigger than we thought. It always was, she said. We just didn't want to believe it. Raker, now that we have the files, what's next? Ava turned to him. We release them. Publicly. Not just Sophia's story, all of it. Julian raised a brow. Whistleblower-level exposure? Yes. You know what that'll mean. Media firestorm, retaliation, threats. Ava's voice didn't waver. And finally, justice. By morning, Margaret had secured an exclusive with The Chronicle, a nationally respected publication with a history of exposing human rights violations. The story would go live in 48 hours after the files were scanned, redacted for victim safety, and prepared for mass release. Back in Chicago, a security detail was posted full-time at the estate. Sophia remained unaware, happily playing, learning new words, asking Ava 1,000 questions each day. Every time Ava heard Mama, it healed something old and deep inside her. But peace wouldn't last. That evening, as the story prepared to break, Ava received a package delivered with no return address. Inside was a single photograph. Sophia, playing in the estate garden. The photo was taken that morning. On the back, a note. Truth has a cost. You've yet to pay yours. Ava sat down slowly, the paper trembling in her hands. Julian stepped into the room and read it over her shoulder. He didn't say a word, just reached out and took her hand. They had shaken a hornet's nest. Now they had to survive the swarm. The front gate of the Hargrove estate groaned open at dawn, its mechanical whine echoing in the stillness. 2 black sedans rolled through, escorted by 3 additional vehicles staffed with federal agents. The air was tense, brimming with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for war zones and scandal. Ava stood just inside the marble foyer, barefoot, holding Sophia on her hip. She had slept lightly, if at all. Sophia had cried twice in the night, not from fear, but from a strange anxiety Ava had learned to recognize. The kind that came when the house felt different, buzzing, guarded, not quite safe. Julian came down the stairs, his voice tight. They're here. Media? No, he said. The Bureau. Margaret called them in early. She's trying to get us in front of this before the release explodes. Ava kissed the top of Sophia's head and handed her gently to Eleanor, who waited nearby. Stay with her. Don't let her near a window. Yes, ma'am. As Ava stepped outside, a breeze whipped across the lawn. She wrapped her cardigan tighter and walked toward the approaching agents. Her chin held high. The lead agent, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and precise movements, extended a badge. Special Agent Deanna Hart, FBI Special Investigations Division. We're here about the files. Julian joined her. You've seen them? Reviewed them, Agent Hart said, and confirmed their authenticity. Ava braced herself, and Hart's face gave nothing away. You've kicked open a hornet's nest. You realize that, Julian answered. That was the point. The agent turned slightly, glancing toward the house. We've been tracking whispers of this program for years, but nothing solid ever surfaced. You just handed us the missing link. But, Ava pressed, but you've exposed a network with ties across state lines, the private sector, foreign governments. This goes beyond custody fraud or medical malpractice. What you've uncovered is a privatized eugenics ring packaged as philanthropy. Ava exhaled shakily. So what happens now? Hart looked at her. Now we protect your family. And we build the case. By noon, the story had broken. The Chronicle ran the headline first. Stolen wombs, the black market empire that built America's elite families. Other outlets followed within minutes. Names, footage, excerpts from the ledger, DNA confirmation reports. An editorial from the paper's lead journalist framed the story with a chilling line. What would you do if you learned the child you raised was never yours to claim? And beneath it, the even harder question. What would you do if you learned the child you lost never died? The response was immediate. Protests erupted outside private hospitals and surrogacy centers. A dozen lawsuits were filed within the first 24 hours. Former donors came forward. So did whistleblowers, women who had once worked in clinics, forced to sign NDAs, now emboldened by Ava's voice. Inside the estate, it was chaos. Reporters at the gates, drones hovering. Threats phoned in. Death wishes disguised as emails. Ava shut off her phone on the second day. Julian never left her side. We have security, full surveillance, he reassured her. But Ava was haunted by the photo, the one that had arrived unmarked, showing Sophia in the garden. Someone had been inside the perimeter. She checked every window, every lock, every mirror, and still, the unease clawed at her spine. Margaret arrived late that evening, laptop in hand, jaw tight. I just got off a call with a U.S. attorney, she said, walking into the sitting room where Julian and Ava were reviewing a new list of affected women. They want you both to testify at a federal hearing in D.C. Julian looked up. When? 3 days. Behind closed doors. This is moving faster than expected. Ava leaned forward. That's good, isn't it? Margaret didn't answer. Instead, she turned her laptop around and hit play. A grainy surveillance clip showed a man tall, suited, slipping something into a child's stroller at a public park. The footage zoomed, and Margaret froze the frame. It was Sophia's toy. A small stuffed bunny Ava hadn't seen in a week. Ava's voice dropped. Where was this? Grant Park. Yesterday. We don't know how long they watched her. Julian's face darkened. She never left the estate. Margaret nodded. Then someone else did. One of the staff, maybe. Or a courier. They're testing the boundaries. Ava stood abruptly, pacing. We can't keep her here anymore, she said. Julian nodded. Then we move her, somewhere private. Margaret hesitated. There's a safe location in Vermont. An old client of mine, senator's widow, owes me favors. It's off the grid, used for witness protection before. You two can stay hidden while we keep the legal wheels turning. Ava's throat tightened. And Sophia? She goes with you, of course. That night, Ava sat beside her daughter's bed, stroking her hair as she slept. She's just a child, she whispered to Julian, who leaned against the doorframe. And already people want to use her. Threaten her. Just because she exists. Julian stepped forward. That's why we protect her. That's why we don't stop. Ava turned to him. What if we're not enough? Julian crouched beside her. We are, he said softly. We have to be. A pause. And if we're not? Julian looked into her eyes. Then we burn it all down. By morning, they were gone. No press, no goodbye, just a quiet exit under heavy protection. Sophia didn't understand the urgency, only that she was riding in a special car with Mama and Dada, and that the bunny she'd lost had somehow returned, now cleaned and stitched. She held it tightly as the trees of Chicago gave way to forest. Hours later, in a different city, a man in a tailored suit stood in front of a wall of screens. He watched Ava's image freeze on the final frame of a news interview, her eyes fierce, her voice calm. She's more dangerous than we anticipated, he muttered to the woman beside him. She's a mother, the woman replied, her voice cold. That makes her lethal. The man reached for a folder on the desk, red-stamped, classified. On the cover, subject, Ava Lewis. Tier 1 priority. Contain or neutralize. The Vermont safe house sat at the edge of a frozen lake, shrouded by a wall of evergreens and silence. It was built like a relic, timber beams, stone fireplaces, and thick curtains that shut out both light and questions. If the world was on fire, this place hadn't yet heard the sirens. Ava stepped out onto the snow-dusted porch as the black SUV pulled away, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. The cold bit hard, but she welcomed it. Cold was real. Cold told the truth. Inside, Julian was unpacking their essentials while Sophia sat on the floor, carefully arranging her toys around her bunny, whom she now called Justice. "You okay?" Julian asked gently, glancing up from a duffel bag. Ava nodded. "She hasn't stopped smiling since we got here." Julian followed her gaze to the child. "She doesn't know she's being hunted." "No," Ava whispered. "But she knows she's loved." By nightfall, they had secured the house. Windows were reinforced, communication devices encrypted. Margaret had arranged drone sweeps and thermal perimeter scans. No one was getting within half a mile without alerting the entire system. But still, Ava couldn't sleep. She lay awake, watching the shadows shift on the ceiling. Every creak in the wood, every gust of wind against the shutters pulled her back to the photo, the one taken inside their garden without anyone noticing. Whoever had done it, they had been close, intimate, invisible, a ghost in plain sight. Julian stirred beside her. "You're thinking too loud." She smiled faintly. "Sorry. What's keeping you up?" "Everything," she admitted. "The files, the lawsuits, the message, the people we haven't saved yet." Julian reached over and took her hand. "You don't have to carry all of it tonight." "But if I don't," she said softly, "who will?" The next morning, Margaret arrived via private chopper, bringing food, updates, and a newspaper folded beneath her coat. Ava barely looked at the headline before she froze. "Federal judge assassinated in Washington oversaw surrogacy exposure case." Her stomach turned to ice. Margaret spoke quietly. Her name was Judge Phillips. She was reviewing 5 emergency injunctions related to the Mulaney files. Car bomb. Broad daylight. Julian cursed under his breath. "This isn't about hiding anymore. This is cleanup." "They're tying off loose ends," Margaret agreed. "And we just became the loosest of them all." Ava stared out the window, heart pounding. "I thought the Bureau had our backs." Margaret frowned. "They do. But not all of them. We've already spotted leaks. 2 agents from Hart's division were reassigned within 12 hours of your testimony. We're playing a game of trust, and the board keeps shifting." Julian crossed his arms. "Then we control the narrative ourselves." Margaret slid a flash drive across the table. "This is the media kit for Phase 2. Video testimonies, whistleblower depositions, child trafficking links. We flood the system, make silence impossible." Ava stared at the drive, then looked at Sophia playing in the next room. "You really think this ends with the truth?" Margaret didn't flinch. "No, but it starts with it." That night, while Julian read Sophia a bedtime story, Ava recorded a video. She sat in front of the stone fireplace, dressed plainly, no makeup, the shadows of firelight dancing across her face. "I'm Ava Lewis," she said to the camera. "I'm not an activist. I'm not famous. I'm a mother. And like many mothers, I was lied to." She spoke calmly, clearly naming names, dates, institutions. "I was told my child died. I was told I was nothing more than a body for rent. I was told to forget." She looked directly into the lens. "I remember everything." She ended the video by holding up Sophia's baby bracelet, the one Isabel had hidden away in a lockbox, long before Ava ever knew it existed. Then she leaned in and whispered, "To the mothers who were told to forget, I believe you, and I will not stop." By sunrise, the video had gone viral. 10 million views in 4 hours. Senators released statements. Hospitals were besieged by protests. Victims began forming coalitions. A class action lawsuit was filed in 3 states simultaneously. But something else happened, too. A name surfaced. Gene Corps Project Director, Eleanor Wells. Ava dropped her coffee mug when she saw it. "Eleanor?" she said aloud, stunned. Julian looked up sharply. "The housekeeper?" Ava nodded slowly. "She was there from the beginning. At Isabel's side. With Sophia. With me." Margaret burst through the front door moments later, tablet in hand. "She disappeared 2 hours ago," she said, breathless. "Walked off the estate. Left her phone behind. She was watching us the whole time." Ava whispered. She was never just staff. Well, later that afternoon, as snow began to fall in heavy flakes, Julian found a letter on the kitchen table. No stamp, no envelope, just his name. He opened it with trembling fingers. She knows. You both were always going to uncover it. I tried to protect the child in my own way. I failed. I'm sorry. Don't look for me. The walls are listening. E. Ava stared at the note, her breath visible in the cold. She was the one who left the bunny in the stroller, Julian said slowly. She planted it to warn us. Or to control the narrative, Margaret added. But Ava wasn't listening anymore. She was watching the trees beyond the window, where a figure had just moved briefly, subtly, before vanishing into the white. A shadow, a ghost. She stood, her voice steady. We need to move, now. Julian grabbed Sophia, still in her slippers. Margaret packed the files. Ava took only what mattered, the ledger, the bracelet, and the flash drive. As they disappeared into the storm, the house behind them remained quiet, empty, waiting. And somewhere inside, in the attic, tucked into a floorboard, a hidden camera blinked red. Watching, recording, listening. The new safe house was nothing like the one in Vermont. It was urban, hidden in plain sight on the 5th floor of an old industrial building in Detroit. The windows were painted black. No mail came in, no deliveries, no names on the buzzer. Just a door, a lock, and silence thick enough to choke on. Ava stood by the window. Not that there was much to see. Just rooftops, pigeons, and the occasional siren bouncing off brick walls. She hadn't spoken much during the drive. Not since they fled the Vermont house after spotting the figure in the woods. The memory of Eleanor's betrayal hung in the air like dust they couldn't clean away. Julian came up behind her, setting a coffee mug beside her hand. You haven't slept, he said. Neither have you. He said nothing. They stood in silence. Sophia was asleep in the next room, curled up with Justice, the stuffed bunny Ava still inspected twice a day for hidden devices. So far, nothing. But the paranoia was a permanent fixture now. Even breathing felt like an act of defense. Did we make a mistake? Ava finally asked. Julian looked at her. Publishing the video? No. Trusting Eleanor. He sighed. She raised Sophia for 2 years. She knew her better than anyone. We had to trust her, if only because we didn't have a choice. Ava closed her eyes. But she walked away. Julian's voice was low. Or she ran, because she knew something worse was coming. By noon, Margaret arrived with news and bruises. She tossed her coat onto the counter and dropped into a chair, her face pale. Ava rushed over. What happened? Surveillance van caught fire outside the firm last night. Arson. No one was inside. But it was a message. Julian frowned. You okay? Margaret waved it off. A little rattled. We're being hunted. But that's not new. What is new? She pulled a thumb drive from her pocket. Is this? She plugged it into the laptop and brought up a grainy clip. Security cam footage from a parking garage. A man in a black suit with a phone to his ear, pacing near a tinted car. He's ex-agency, Margaret said. Name's Logan Tarrant. Used to work Black Ops Intelligence, then disappeared after a congressional inquiry into private biotesting in South America. He's surfaced again now tied to Gene Corps as a freelance contractor. Ava leaned in. Why now? Margaret's jaw clenched. Because he was Eleanor's handler. Julian swore under his breath. She wasn't just a housekeeper, Ava said. She was a plant. Margaret nodded. Placed inside the Hargrove estate before the birth. Her job wasn't just to observe you. It was to ensure that if anything ever did leak, she could manage the fallout or neutralize the threat. Neutralize? Ava repeated, cold spreading through her. Margaret met her eyes. You. Sophia. Anyone who got too close. The room fell silent. Then Julian's voice broke it. We have to flip her. Ava turned to him, shocked. She's gone. But not lost, he said. If she was going to kill us, she would have done it already. I think she's on the fence. If we can find her, we make her talk. God, Margaret sighed. I may have a way. That night, they set a trap. Using a secure back channel, Margaret sent out a message through an old Geneva-based network, encrypted, coded, but with a clear signal buried inside. E. W. The child remembers. Ava forgives. We need the truth. It was risky. If anyone else intercepted it, they'd know Ava was still alive. But hours later, they got a ping. GPS coordinates. Ava stared at the blinking dot on the map. Cleveland? Margaret nodded. Abandoned rail yard. 11:30 p.m. Julian said what they were all thinking. It's probably a setup, Ava replied anyway. Then we go armed. And ready. The rail yard was colder than expected. Metal groaned under the wind. Snow swirled through the broken beams. They parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, flashlights off, armed with night vision lenses and encrypted comms. Margaret stayed in the car, monitoring from a secure laptop feed. I've got drone coverage. 2 heat signatures. Stationary. East building. Julian and Ava moved fast. Inside, it smelled like rust and gasoline. The floor was littered with glass and time. In the corner, beneath the shadow of a collapsed catwalk, a figure stood, coat drawn tight, head lowered. Ava approached carefully. Eleanor? The woman looked up. It was her. Paler, older, tired. But her eyes, the ones that once soothed Sophia through long nights, were still the same. You shouldn't have come, Eleanor whispered. Then why did you call us? Ava shot back. Eleanor looked at her. Because you're going to die, and I couldn't live with it. Julian stepped forward. Then help us stop it. Eleanor shook her head. You can't. You've exposed something that was never meant to be seen. Do you know how long it's been running? 47 years. Generations of wealth built on these arrangements. The children, your daughter, they're not just stolen. They're placed, bred, watched. Ava's voice was a blade. You knew, and you helped. I protected her, Eleanor cried. Every day, I shielded her from what they wanted to make her become. She was the one thing I ever did right. Julian's voice was ice. Then give us something. A name, a location, anything. Eleanor paused, trembling. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out a worn envelope. Inside was a photograph, a group of infants in sterile cribs, each tagged with identical barcodes. On the back, Facility 9, Archive, Echo Ridge, Dub, deep in Montana, she whispered. They're still running trials. Not just babies anymore. They're breeding matches. Genetically engineered heirs for political families. Ava's blood ran cold. How do we get in? Eleanor's eyes met hers. You don't. A gunshot cracked the night. Eleanor collapsed, chest blooming red. Ava screamed. Julian pulled her down as 2 more shots echoed, splintering beams overhead. Sniper. Margaret's voice blared in the comm. They dragged Eleanor behind a beam. She was gasping, blood bubbling at her lips. Ava held her hand. Stay with me, please. Eleanor struggled. I tried. One final breath. Then stillness. Julian scanned the roofline, spotted the shooter. 1 o'clock, second beam, west side. He raised his weapon, fired once. A body fell. Minutes later, Margaret arrived with backup. They swept the area, secured Eleanor's body, and collected the photo. She gave us a map, Ava said numbly, with her last breath. Julian stared into the dark. Then we follow it. And for the first time in weeks, Ava didn't feel afraid. She felt ready. Snow covered the roads in Montana like a white lie, quiet, concealing, seemingly harmless. But Ava knew better. Truth didn't vanish in the cold. It merely waited. They parked the SUV 2 miles from the outer coordinates Eleanor had given them before she died. The air was sharp, the wind biting at their cheeks as they began the long trek through dense forest. Ava's heart pounded harder with each step. Somewhere out here, beyond the trees and the hush, was Facility 9, the place where her child had been barcoded, where others were likely still being bred, trained, and controlled like assets. Drone scans active, Margaret said through Ava's earpiece. Still no visible motion around the coordinates. It's buried deep, minimal footprint. Julian walked beside Ava, snow crunching beneath their boots. We go in. Document everything. Photos, Files. If we can extract anyone safely, we do. But this isn't a rescue op, it's about exposure. Ava nodded. If there are more children, they deserve to be seen. And if this place was still operational, it needed to burn. The facility wasn't what Ava expected. From the outside, it looked like a weather station, one squat building with a faded satellite dish, 2 metal outbuildings, and a perimeter fence barely 6 feet tall. Deceptively ordinary, but the truth was buried underground. Julian found the access panel near the rear of the main structure, hidden beneath a rusted maintenance grate. A fingerprint scanner blinked red offline. Manual override, Margaret said. You've got 30 seconds once you trip the latch. We haven't Estrago. Julian pried the panel open, exposed the wiring, and triggered the release. With a mechanical click, a hidden door in the snowy earth opened like the mouth of a predator. They descended. The hallway was sterile, silent, and cold. Metal walls, dim lights, the scent of antiseptic and electricity. This was built for permanence, Julian muttered. Military-grade infrastructure. They passed a storage room filled with labeled canisters, serums, nutrition logs, injectable supplements, the kind not meant for any FDA inspection. Ava opened a drawer and found rows of vials. One read, Neurostim Alpha, Batch 14, Test Age, 3-6. She blinked hard. Their engineering cognitive growth. Julian looked at the chart next to it. Or compliance. They moved deeper. A locked door marked Observation Room, Active Trials, barred their path. Julian hacked the access pad with a portable device. The door slid open with a hiss. Inside, a glass wall overlooked a large, clinical room. Toys, beds, cameras in every corner, and children. 8 of them, all under the age of 7, all silent, sitting perfectly still. Not playing, not crying, just waiting. Ava's knees nearly buckled. Oh my God, Julian's face went pale. They're conditioned. One child turned toward the glass. Not out of curiosity, but almost as if trained to sense the gaze of a stranger. Ava pressed her hand to the window. The child blinked once. No expression. Margaret's voice came through the comm. Ava, I'm picking up heat signatures in the western tunnel. You've got maybe 10 minutes before someone sees your trace. We're not leaving without proof, Julian said. Get the extraction files. Backup drives. Video logs. They split up Ava and Julian to the records room, Margaret monitoring from the entrance. In the records room, Ava found what she feared. Digital logs of each child, categorized by trial batch, parental DNA markers, behavioral milestones, and placement projections. Some had labels like pending placement, political tier. Others read, failed compliance, reclassify. She scrolled faster, then stopped. File code, ZR019, her own. She opened it. There it was. Her name, her DNA, Sophia's infant biometrics, and beneath it, a list of post-placement interventions ordered by Director L. Tarrant. Julian stepped beside her. That's our guy. Ava's eyes narrowed. He didn't just run the program, he adjusted it. He decided who was worth keeping. That had Frest. Her hands trembled, but she transferred every file to the encrypted drive. Then the lights cut out. Julian swore. We're blown. Margaret's voice came through, tense. 2 guards just entered through a hidden corridor. I'm rerouting their signal. You've got 1 exit. Move now. They ran. In the hallway, alarms began to blare. Red lights strobed overhead. Ava clutched the drive like it was Sophia herself. As they turned the final corner, they passed a door that made her stop dead in her tracks. Post-reclassification, Storage Unit C. Her gut screamed. She shoved the door open. Inside were 5 small beds. 3 of them were occupied. Children unmoving, eyes open, staring blankly at the ceiling. Sedated? No. Worse. Ava rushed to one. No pulse. Julian pulled her back. They're gone. They reclassified them as failures, Ava whispered, and discarded them like trash. We go dat. Julian's jaw clenched. We expose this. Every last photo. Every log. They emerged into the snow, lungs burning. Margaret waved them into the SUV. already revving. As they drove, Ava couldn't look back. She didn't need to. The screams were already etched into her memory. 2 hours later, back in the safe zone, Margaret uploaded the drive to 5 international media contacts. She attached photos of the children, both the living and the discarded. She made sure the world would see what power tried to erase. Ava sat by Sophia's bed that night, holding her hand while she slept. For the first time in days, she let the tears fall freely. Not from fear, but from rage, and love, and promise. "They won't win," she whispered. Sophia stirred, half asleep, and murmured, "Mama?" Ava kissed her forehead. "Right here, baby. Always." Rain fell over Washington, D.C., in icy sheets, the kind of relentless cold that soaked through coat seams and made marble monuments seem like tombstones. It was fitting. Ava had returned to the capital, not for justice, but to bury something, or someone. In the 72 hours since the Echo Ridge files were published worldwide, the world had split in two. One half wanted answers, the other wanted silence. Politicians gave statements calculated, practiced, performative. Celebrities pledged support. 3 biotech CEOs resigned. A senator fumbled through a press conference when asked why his adopted daughter shared 98.6% DNA with a woman now suing Gene Corps. But what chilled Ava most were the denials. "The footage has been doctored. These mothers signed away rights. This is foreign propaganda designed to destabilize the American family." The truth had detonated, and still, the powerful tried to crawl from the rubble and pretend nothing had changed. But Ava had changed. She had watched a child die in a steel crib, while alarms blared in her ears. She would never forget that. Julian, Margaret, and Ava sat inside a private conference room at a federal courthouse. They were hours away from delivering formal testimony to a grand jury that would determine if charges would proceed against Gene Corps, the Mullaney Foundation, and their political partners. Margaret set down her phone. "2 senators have flipped. They'll testify." One of them admitted he placed a child into his sister's home after purchasing through a legacy donor match, a euphemism for genetic procurement. Julian rubbed his temples. "This isn't just trafficking. It's dynasty manufacturing. And control," Margaret added. "Every child placed in a home of influence is a pawn. Designed to fit. Groomed to obey. Genetic perfection. Raised on a leash." Ava stood and walked to the window, watching federal agents swarm the courtyard below. "Do you remember what Eleanor said?" she asked quietly. "They're not just stolen, they're placed." Julian joined her. Echo Ridge wasn't an endpoint. It was a model. Ava turned, fire in her eyes. "Then let's make sure the model is burned." That afternoon, Ava took the stand behind closed doors. No cameras, no public gallery, just a dozen jurors, 2 federal prosecutors, and 3 government officials so stone-faced they might have been carved. She recounted everything: her surrogacy, the lies, the false death certificate, the discovery of Sophia, the files, the children, the dead. Her voice did not crack, not once. When the federal prosecutor asked why she had risked her life to expose it all, she answered without pause. "Because my daughter isn't a product. She's not a name in a file, or a percentage in a bloodline. She's a person. And no one has the right to decide who deserves to be born or remembered." There was silence after she finished. One juror, an older black man with gray at his temples, blinked away tears and gave her a slow, solemn nod. That was enough. That night, they returned to the townhouse, temporary but secure, arranged by Margaret's network of allies. Sophia ran to Ava as she stepped inside, beaming with her bunny in hand. "I drew a picture of our house," she exclaimed. Ava dropped to her knees. "Show me." 980. The drawing was clumsy but heartfelt. A small house with yellow windows, stick figure people, a dog, they didn't have one, and hearts above everyone's head. "You even drew Julian." Ava smiled. "He'll love that." Sophia leaned in. "He's daddy now." Ava blinked. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Sophia grinned. "I said he's daddy. Can I call him that?" From the hallway, Julian froze. Ava looked up at him. His eyes softened. "Only if you mean it. Ever." Sophia ran to him and wrapped her arms around his legs. "Daddy!" Julian picked her up, tears in his eyes. Ava watched, her heart too full for words. The child who once hadn't spoken for 2 years, now had found not just her voice but her family. Later that evening, Margaret received an encrypted call. She stepped outside to take it. When she returned, her expression was grim. "Ava, Julian," she said, "you need to see this." She handed them a phone. On screen, CCTV footage from a classified government server, a prison facility. Solitary cell. A figure pacing inside, tall, lean, scar running down his cheek. "Who is that?" Ava asked. Margaret's voice was tight. "Logan Tarrant," Julian swore. "I thought he fled the country." "He did," Margaret said. "But someone found him, someone powerful. He was extradited last night under Black Seal. No media, no trial. They're holding him in a ghost facility." "Why?" Ava asked. Margaret hesitated. "Because he's talking." Julian straightened. "To who?" "To someone with presidential clearance." Ava narrowed her eyes. "So this is about control again." Margaret nodded. "They don't want him in court. They want him silenced, or used." Ava stared at the screen. "We have to get to him." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "To do what?" Ava's voice was steady. "To ask him what comes next." 3 hours later, in a garage beneath a Washington hotel, Ava and Julian met with a man known only as Cooper, an ex-intelligence asset turned whistleblower advocate. He wore a military jacket and kept one hand near his hip at all times. "They're planning a wipe," Cooper said. "Files, witnesses, assets. Tarrant is the key. He built Echo Ridge, but it was only one of 7 facilities." "7," Julian whispered. Cooper nodded. 2 in the U.S., 1 in Canada, 1 in Switzerland, 3 in Southeast Asia, funded by shell corporations tied to global elites. "And you're telling us this? Why?" Ava asked. Cooper looked her in the eye. "Because your daughter isn't just the symbol of what they did. She's the proof it failed." Ava frowned. "Failed? They tried to erase you. And her. But she remembers. Loves. Chooses. That's not programming. That's humanity. They didn't perfect the system. They corrupted it." He slid a key card across the table. "Tomorrow at noon, I'll get you into the holding facility. But after that, you're on your own." Ava picked up the key card. "I've been on my own a long time," she said. "This time, I'm not afraid." Cooper smiled. "Then you're ready." Outside, the rain turned to snow. Tomorrow, she would look into the eyes of the man who designed the system that stole her child, and she would make him see her, not as a vessel, not as a liability, but as the reckoning. The federal black site facility was buried beneath layers of concrete and denial. No official signage. No visible cameras. No paperwork linking it to any department. Just a steel door inside a hollowed-out warehouse along the Potomac, protected by biometric locks and men with the kind of eyes that didn't flinch. Ava stood outside it now, her breath frosting in the December air. The keycard Cooper had given her worked, of course it did. Margaret was monitoring from a surveillance van half a mile away. Julian was inside with her, holding Sophia's favorite drawing in his lap. Waiting. Hoping. This time, Ava was going in alone. "I need him to look me in the eye," she'd said, and no one had argued. The corridor was silent as death. Each step echoed. Ava's boots clicking against the polished floor, the sound growing louder with each heartbeat. A guard met her at the final checkpoint, scanned her face, and wordlessly opened the last door. Inside was a room made of reinforced glass and gilt. Logan Tarrant sat at a steel table. Shackled. Calm. His hair had grayed, but his posture still held the arrogance of a man who believed in his own power. He looked up and smiled. "Miss Lewis," he said. "I wondered how long it would take." Ava didn't sit. She let the silence stretch. "I buried 3 children last week," she said finally. "Children you labeled as unfit." He shrugged. "They didn't meet the metrics." Ava stepped closer to the glass. "They met the world. That's what scared you." Tarrant studied her. "You don't understand. You were never meant to. You were a vessel. A casing. Biology in motion. Sophia was part of a design. She's not yours." Ava hissed. She's not yours either, he replied calmly. Not entirely. She was selected. Every cell was chosen. Every trait enhanced. We designed her to fit perfectly into power. But she didn't, Ava said. She found me. And you failed. Tarrant leaned forward, eyes gleaming. No. She betrayed the system. Because you infected her. With sentiment, emotion, chaos. Ava laughed softly, bitterly. You think love is chaos? To order, yes. Ava stepped closer. Then maybe it's time we burn your order down. Tarrant's smile faltered. She pulled a small device from her coat pocket, live streaming audio to 3 national newsrooms, an encrypted backup channel Margaret had coordinated. Tarrant saw it and froze. You're already exposed, Ava said. But now the world hears it from you. He leaned back. You think they'll care? The world runs on stolen children, Ava. Stolen labor. Stolen land. You just pulled back one curtain. Then I'll pull back 10 more. His face twisted. Do you know how many names you've condemned? How many legacies you've just crippled? Yes, Ava said, fire in her voice. All of them. Later, outside the facility, the cold wrapped around her like armor. Margaret met her at the edge of the van, holding out her phone. 27 million views, she said. Already, Margaret nodded. His confession hit harder than we expected. Congress just issued a special hearing request. Civil rights groups are flooding the courts. Is next Julian stepped out, his face pale, his arms open. Ava walked into them, burying her face in his shoulder. It's done, she whispered. Not yet, Julian said gently, but it's starting. Over the following weeks, the dominoes fell. 7 biotech executives were indicted. The Mullaney Foundation's assets were frozen. 3 private clinics were raided and shut down. 1 senator stepped down. Another was arrested. And in households across the country, adopted children asked questions that shook the foundations of family. Some parents answered, some deflected, others begged forgiveness. But the silence once deafening was gone. Ava declined every interview. She didn't want a book deal or a platform. She wanted her life back. Instead, she helped establish the Mothers of the Taken, a nonprofit aiding women who had been victims of black market surrogacy and illegal child placements. It began with 3 women. By spring, it had over 10,000. In March, Ava stood with Julian and Sophia in front of a small brick home in Maryland. It was theirs. No guards, no fences, just a porch swing and a garden they'd plant in April. Sophia ran across the grass, giggling as butterflies chased her shadow. She's free, Julian said, watching her. No, Ava corrected softly. She's becoming free. Julian nodded. So are you. Ava smiled, and for the first time in a long time, it reached her eyes. That night, as she tucked Sophia into bed, the little girl held up her bunny Justice and whispered, Mama? Yes, baby. Did you save me? Ava kissed her forehead. You saved me first. Somewhere, deep in an undisclosed prison, Logan Tarrant watched the news on a silent screen. His name, blurred now. His empire, erased. And a child's voice on a grainy video saying, Mama, to the woman who wouldn't let go. He turned away from the screen, not out of shame, but fear, because love had done what power never could, ended him. The story reminds us that true power doesn't come from wealth, control, or carefully constructed systems. It comes from love, truth, and the courage to speak when others remain silent. Ava's journey teaches us that no matter how broken the system, one voice, when fueled by purpose and compassion, can shake the walls of injustice. In the end, it wasn't revenge that brought change, but a mother's quiet refusal to forget her child.